So you're creating your first collection and you find that you just have too many products, and you have too many products that seem to be unrelated to each other, but deep down you know that they deserve a spot in your brand. How do you still keep your strong brand positioning? How do you keep the products in your range consistent and so that everything feels cohesive, but also still create clear separations between product collection A, product collection B, product collection C. So that way, 1 year, 2 years down the line, you don't find yourself in a situation where you're looking at your brand, you're confused, you're scratching your head, and you're like, what does this brand even mean? What do I stand for? What do we represent? Well, on today's episode, we're going to be looking at product collections, and specifically, we're going to be looking at product lines. What is a product line? How do you have multiple product lines? How to think about the depth versus the length of your product line, as well as the width of your product lines. What does all this mean? Are you confused? Well, you won't be after the end of this episode. Welcome to Fittdesign TV. Are you interested in sports fashion, design, and manufacturing? Are you establishing your own brand? You're looking good. Anthony, how are we doing? Do you want to? Thank you. Well, you've come to the right place. Lights, camera, action. First, let's try to understand what a product line actually is and how can it impact your brand. A product line is a group of similar products, all designed, developed with the same customer base, the same functionality, the same manufacturing techniques in mind. It is essentially a group of isolated products that are for a specific end user. A good example of this would be to look at Nike. Nike is a massive brand, but within Nike, they have multiple product lines. You have Nike Air, you have Nike Running, you have Nike's trainer division, you have Nike's Nike Lab division. All of these different divisions or product lines offer something to a different end consumer and are typically marketed differently. It also has to come down to how does the brand market its different product lines. Is one more luxurious than the other? Is one typically seen as more functional than the others? This gives a brand the opportunity to explore different categories without sullying or without sort of distorting their core brand demographic. It gives them the ability to venture into new areas, into new markets without having to deter or to dismantle the brand graphic or the brand demographics that they built from the ground up. Let's look at a specific scenario in which this idea of the product line can get a little bit confusing. We've identified that a product line is a specific set of products that is uniquely targeting a demographic or a product type or a product category. When we look at Nike Running, we may have Nike Running specifically for adults and we may have Nike Running specifically for kids. The difference here is the type of marketing that we apply to both of these product lines. So although they are within the same demographic, they're both catering towards the running demographic. Because one is actually catering more towards adults versus the other one is more towards kids. And this differs in terms of how we think about the marketing, how we think about the pricing strategy, how we think about the actual product design. These would be considered two different product lines besides or even though that they're both created with the same sort of functionality and the same product type in mind. Next up, let's look at width, or more specifically product mix width. The product mix width number actually outlines the number of separate product lines that are within a brand's portfolio. The wider the number or the larger the number, that means the more individual product lines that a brand will have. This will allow them to tap into wider markets, to cater towards a wider range of customers, and to capture a wider variety of different niches. This, although is not necessarily recommended for smaller brands, specifically because it takes a lot of R&D to develop all of these different product lines. It takes a lot of management resources, a lot of human resources in order to keep everything in check. When you have a limited budget, you need to be very specific where you apply your resources. My recommendation at most would be, as a startup brand, to limit your product mix width to 1 or 2 ranges at the very most. Next, we need to look at the length of the product line. These are the individual or each individual product types that are within a brand's product line. For example, let's just say we had a brand that had 2 separate product lines. Each of these product lines has 3 different products or product types that are within these product lines. The product length would be, or the line length would be 2 multiplied by 3 individual product types that are within each of these lines, and this would be 6 in total. It's very essential that as a company scales, that it maintains or it monitors the average length of its product lines. We also have to evaluate the depth. The depth is and has to do with the variations of each product type that are within each product lines. Now, let's look at a specific extreme scenario in which the consistency of product lines across a brand are very inconsistent. Let's look at the production and the end use case scenario of product line 1 and product line 2 for brand A. Product line 1 is specifically for soccer teams. It's a low run manufacturing specifically for soccer teams, and it's highly customized specifically for the teams that brand is working with. Product line 2 is their more mass market training gear that is meant to be sold across a variety of different regions and a variety of different teams. Whereas with product line 1, the manufacturing facilities need to be much more specialized, much more focused on low run manufacturing in order to be highly customizable. Product line 2 is much more mass market, and you're most likely going to be able to go for a larger scale manufacturing and potentially a larger facility altogether. So even though both of these are catering towards the soccer sports segment, one is specifically for team sports and one is more for the training public. And this brings with it a caveat or a variety of different issues in the production realm. Versus if the same company was to create two different product lines. One is specifically for weightlifting and the other is specifically for running. Yes, both of the end use case scenarios are a little bit different, but they are fashion accessories at the end of the day, or they're fashion sportswear pieces at the end of the day. And both of them can actually be manufactured in the same facility with the same accessories and the same trims without the need for any additional outside influence in order to be able to differentiate between product line 1 and product line 2. Here we would have a much higher consistency than the first example that I gave you. So what should your strategy be across your product mix? Well, smaller brands and starter brands, we're going to have a much lower or a limited project mix, width, length, and depth. This is specifically because they have a smaller budget and they need to be much more mindful of their resources. Using a wider length, width, depth, and being inconsistent across your product lines can typically lead to a misallocation of resources, a mismanaged budget, and difficulty in meeting minimum order quantities specifically from manufacturers, because the more variety that you have, the more that you have to deal with the specifics of having to reach a specific quantity with manufacturer X and then having to do so again with manufacturer Y, Z, and so on and so forth in order to be able to fulfill on the different ranges or the different variations in your product mix. However, as you actually grow, you now have the opportunity, you have the human resources, the financial capital, and the expertise to be able to expand your product mix. So that way you can go into two new markets, you can target new demographics, and you can increase your bottom line and your overall revenue. But this is a strategy to be planned ahead of time and to be approached with caution as you scale as a business. If you guys are interested in knowing specifically what would be the unique and ideal product mix strategy for your brand, well, let's book a one-on-one consultation. I hold limited slots every single week. What I'd like to do is get to know your brand a little bit better, look at the pain points, look at where you see yourself in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and we'll be able to plot specifically the different product lines that you have. We'll look at the length, we'll look at the depth and the width, and we'll be able to evaluate your consistency, how we're able to sort of put different things together, how we're able to maintain consistency across your manufacturing facilities, the way that you're marketing, the way that you're reusing accessories and trims across your brands and your different product lines. So definitely check the link in the description. I'd love to hop on that call with you. Guys, from the very bottom of my heart, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Fittdesign TV. Until next week's episode, stay awesome.